John Southurst reporting for CoinGeek at London Blockchain Conference 2024. I just watched the last presentation of the day and it just happened to be the one I really needed to hear because it was Dr. Scott Zoldi. He's a Chief Analytics Officer at FICO. Now, you might know FICO from the famous credit scores, which you actually helped pioneer, or pioneered.
Yes.
You've got over 96 patents granted to you, and you've been working in the industry for 25 years.
That's right.
Your talk was on blockchain and AI. Now, honestly, sometimes when we combine blockchain and AI, people roll their eyes because they think we're putting buzzwords together just to sell an idea or a new concept, like cloud computing, AI and cloud, blockchain and cloud, blockchain and AI.
Yep.
However, you made it all make sense. I'd really like to hear more about how blockchain actually does work on AI. You personally coined the term responsible AI. Could you define what responsible AI is for us?
Yeah. So responsible AI is focused on types of AI algorithms that are able to be used to make high risk or consequential decisions. And so these models are so important that we need to have transparency on the fact that the model was built robustly, that we can interpret or explain it, that we can show that it's ethical, and then we can audit every step of the way because the decisions are so impactful that we need to make sure that it's built to a high level standard and a standard that we are willing to share because it's that important that the models are built correctly. And if that's all done and audited and enforced, then we have this concept of responsible AI. And that responsible AI concept then is used across an entire organization, right? And so it's basically the credos, if you will, for how an organization will build models to that standard and enforce that they're built properly.
Now at FICO, you've actually created a model that you use for responsible AI, and you used a term called the human in the loop. How does that work?
So one of the things that's really important is that AI, I don't care what kind of AI it is simply a tool. Sometimes a sophisticated tool to process data, but we, the scientists and the testers and the validators, need to look at what those outputs are, what is the machine learning, and then decide whether or not we will accept what it's learned. And so it may find relationships in the data that we don't feel should be used to make a decision about a consumer. Or we might find relationships that could impute bias, or we will show imputes bias. And so we need to be able to have the human look at that and say that's unallowed, remove it, and start again. And so this sort of focus is on humans being part of the development process, making those critical decisions around what is right or wrong, because AI is not either good or bad, right? It's not moral, it's just a tool. And so the humans have to come in and make those decisions. And it's those same human decisions that we are reporting to the blockchain, because they're critically important. So if we want to go back and understand how were all the decisions made when this model was going to be released, we can go look at that. It also, because it's on the blockchain and that's an immutable record of those decisions, the people working on that are taking their jobs very seriously because they understand the gravity of those decisions, the fact that it'll be on that blockchain and immutable, but also that it'll be inspected. And they take their jobs much more seriously than, let's say, somebody that wants to take data, throw it into a cloud, and train a model in an hour. That's not the way we build models responsibly.
Yeah, could you give us an example of something your auditors might have found in an AI model that needed to be corrected?
So one of the biggest things that we find in AI models is imputed bias. So a sad fact is that all data is biased one way or another because society's biased. And so very often what we find, we obviously remove the natural things that could drive bias in models, but AI models, machine learning models, explore all kinds of different relationships. And so they'll find what's called imputed bias. So for example, the type of housing, it could impute a different level of bias towards a certain ethnic group or racial group based on the fact that they may be more associated with that type of housing. And so it may not be obvious on the very front of it driving bias, but this process of responsible AI ensures that every relationship found by the machine learning model is being tested. And then if there's an unacceptable difference, let's say in terms of how one group versus another group fire on that sort of attribute, it gets removed. And so that's an example of something that comes out of that method, which otherwise would be undetectable, and you just run with it because you wouldn't know. What we're trying to do is make sure that these are not black boxes. They have to be things that we can go look and inspect.
For sure. Now, how do you deal with the issue of any inherent biases that the auditors themselves may have?
So it's an interesting question. So one main thing that we have is that we develop a model development standard. And so there's usually a round table of people that are making decisions around, okay, what is the standard for, let's say, meeting an ethical model that is not biased? That's usually done as a group. Those standards are set. They're determined as success criteria. Now, one can argue the standard and adjust the standard over time, but once that standard is defined, then it's around using blockchain to enforce that it was met. And so generally what we have is that standard where we discuss what our standards are for meeting that. That's what the conversation is about. And if there's disagreement, then that's where all the collective energy will occur. And it's important we do that because many organizations, like financial organizations, will build thousands of models a year. You can't have that conversation at any level of depth on thousands of models, but you can have a very in-depth conversation with one standard. And that's how we get to that level of where there might be disagreements or where there may be adjustments down the line to how we meet those standards of responsible AI.
Yeah. And has your model been adopted by anyone outside of FICO?
So today, all the models that we develop at FICO uses this responsible AI methodology. So the models that go out to detect fraud or to make credit risk decisions are built around these responsible AI frameworks. We're in the midst of making these same algorithms and that blockchain available to customers themselves to use. Also sharing the methodologies with other AI companies that are interested in how they want to best address responsible AI. We don't see this as something to keep private. We see this as something that industry needs, and we're working to make it more and more available on our FICO platform, which is where our customers would come in and build their own models in their businesses. And so that's one application. We also want to make it more available to those that will build outside of our software so that they have a guide to how to do that properly.
Yeah. And we did promise that we'd talk about blockchain. So I think you said you've been using Hyperledger Fabric as your platform for that. Now, Hyperledger Fabric that's not an open blockchain. Is that right?
Correct. We're using a private blockchain. Yep.
And how does that affect the ability for, say, someone outside of the organization to audit what you're doing?
So the way that works for us, and this will be probably a model for many companies that consider their AI or machine learning to be IP, intellectual property, is that we make we add people to the private blockchain as needed, right? So we have authentication purposes, and so if you are an auditor or regulator or someone at a customer that needed to see more details, and you didn't want to take my word for it, and you shouldn't, you would be granted access to this blockchain. You could get access to those assets yourself, and you'd see the full truth because it's recorded to that blockchain. So it's handled through authentication of roles onto that blockchain that will have access. And so, yes, the whole world won't have access to the blockchain and the IP, nor should they, because of IP and other sort of sensitive issues.
Yeah.
But the right sort of delegates will have, and they have then this permission view into that blockchain, which is great because we don't need them necessarily to get expert in all our development processes. What they need to be expert in is getting into that blockchain, navigating it, look at the outcomes themselves, and ensure that they're comfortable with it. And that the blockchain provides that, if you will, fabric between, let's say, a company's sausage making and the regulation that they're trying to meet. And it's a happy medium where they connect and they can review.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? You need to keep everything open enough for it to be auditable, but at the same time, you also need to protect the work you're doing and the IP you're working on, the systems you're developing.
Correct.
So I can see you've got quite a challenge there. It's quite funny, we're talking about technology, but in the end, it's really the human element that is making the difference here.
It's around the human element, and it's around ensuring that we drive that level of accountability. The sad fact is most data scientists want to do the right things, right? And they don't know how. right? Or too much responsibilities put on them to do the right things. Through things like blockchain and enforcing the model development standard, they can go about their work in piece parts, and they can make sure that they've met all those requirements. And that's a happy medium, because we're, from that perspective, the data scientist knows exactly what to do because it's prescribed. That prescription of how it gets done is shared with regulatory bodies, and then AI blockchain, that AI accountability enforces that it's followed, right? And so it's kind of that happy medium. So it's an interesting time. I think we're going to see more and more of this having to be the standard, because otherwise, things are going to be very, very all over the place, and we just simply can't operate that way when we impact human life with some of these models.
Yeah, that's true. And then this is all, of course, AI as it impacts human behavior and human interactions too. Will we ever reach a point where humans are removed from the equation completely and we have AIs building their own AI models?
So, not on my watch.
Good.
So I think it's a very difficult, conversation topic. One of the things that's really important is I think human in the loop is it's central to FICO, and it's central to us remaining in control, right? Anyone can, even today, can have a put a blinder on to what they're doing and just look at the results and be happy with it, right? Those organizations that take the time to have humans in the loop and make critical, hard decisions about how they want that AI to be developed are going to be the companies that will gain that sort of consumer trust. I mean, one of the things I talked about in the talk was that AI trust is at a kind of an all-time low right now.
Exactly.
And so companies that take this seriously, right, are going to be the ones that establish that sort of trust. Having AI models build AI models is not going to end well. And I'm not talking about end of the world, but I am talking about models that will impact consumers in very negative ways. And that's really where my heart is at, because one really, really bad decision that impacts one person can have a very big impact on that person's life, right? And so it's a very serious business. And I think sometimes, because it's so easy to go build AI models today and get access to data, that you do it and you don't ask whether you should do it or how to do it carefully.
Precisely. Yeah. So just to wrap it up, in your opinion, can we have a world where humans do trust AI, or will there always be that inherent mistrust?
So, I think there's this concept of guardrails that are placed around AI models, or particularly generative AI models. Humans will trust AI when they have a sense that organizations have a model development standard that they're going to use across the scientists, that standard has been shared with regulatory bodies so that the regulators are comfortable that it meets standards, and that something like AI will enforce it, right? And then I think they will be in a situation where they'll trust that AI is built properly. And the companies that do that, frankly, will see AI as a tool. And that's all it is. It's a tool, right? And so from that perspective, it's not some intelligence that we have to be worried about. It's around building that tool in a way that is good for us. I mean, there's a quote that I like to tell from George Box, a famous statistician, right? It says, all models are wrong and some are useful. And so our job is to figure out what is useful, define what that is, and build that, right? And accept the fact that there'll be other guardrails in place for how these models are sometimes wrong. And if you go through all that rigor, trust will get established.
Absolutely. All right, Scott. Well, thanks a lot for clearing all that up for us. And I found it very reassuring.
Thank you.
And in future, when someone says to me, AI and blockchain buzzwords, I will refer them to one of your pieces.
We got the killer application, yep, the two paired together.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
BSV is more than another chaotic commodity craze. BSV blockchain can do more than just be a crypto investment. It can help you get more out of your games, share more of your art. BSV makes more things possible. Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin wallet, blockchain, stablecoins, MetaNet, the evolution of money. Everybody is talking about Bitcoin today, but what exactly is it? Learn the basics from experts. Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Blockchain 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.